Hi, this is Casey Spencer. I thought I'd take a few minutes to go over something that I call camera fundamentals. Before talking about any particular camera, how it works, etc., it's helpful to just talk about some of my, or anybody's potentially, basic safety rules and camera protection, other things that can prolong the life of the camera and keep you out of trouble. This particular camera here is an older Minolta film camera. It's what's called an SLR, or single lens reflex camera, and this camera has it's probably about 55 years old. With any camera, but especially something that's valuable, I've got one basic rule: the strap goes over the neck. I kind of don't waver from that rule ever since I paid a whole lot of money for a new sophisticated digital camera, and I knew that I was prone to drop things. So it's a great habit to build, especially if you're borrowing a camera, or if you're carrying something that has the possibility of being stolen or dropped, etc. That's one fundamental right there. Fundamental with a lot of older cameras is to turn off the battery. This camera has a light metering device built into it, and the battery is controlled with this little switch down here. It's so easy to forget because these don't have memories that turn off after 30 seconds or batteries that switch off when you close the camera, etc. In this particular camera, the two positions are off and on, plus BC for battery check. This is where the battery goes. It costs about $6, and you have to hunt through a lot of stores to find one. It's another reason to try to remember that as part of the shooting protocol. If the camera is valuable or important, you may want to keep the lens cap on it. That's an easy thing to lose. Lens caps get lost because we don't know where we put them. Just always put it in the same place. This is a traditional modern kind of cap. I don't know if traditional and modern makes sense, but you squeeze these buttons in and the cap sits in there. It sits inside of the filter ring. Now, another fundamental, this ring is a threaded ring on the inside. It's pretty common. They come in different sizes, but these threaded rings will accept filters, and many photographers frequently mount a clear glass filter. It could be called a UV or a skylight filter. It screws into place and protects the lens from damage and doesn't necessarily change the image at all. This is an old filter from a different lens, but the point being that this sort of a filter can protect not only the lens from being damaged if you bump into something, but it protects these threads. Once you mount a new filter, the threads right here are the ones that get dented if you run into the side of a concrete building or something. So again, these are just lessons for people who are kind of clumsy, like me, or never want to be called clumsy, like I've been. Next, safety matters have to do with what to touch and what not to touch. If you touch the lens, you'll get a little bit of grease from your finger. It's not the end of the world, but that's what will be left in the lens. If you wipe the lens, any dirt that's embedded in the grease will rub into the glass. The glass isn't particularly soft, but eventually you can start to take away some of the gloss on the glass. The way to clean a lens is you can go buy expensive exotic lens cleaning tissue, or you can take a little bit of Windex if you really want to break all the rules. Accept the rules in the How to Repair Your Own Camera manual. I've read 3 of these books, and they all have the same advice: Windex and a lint-free tissue. Don't use tissue that has a fragrance or hand or fabric softener or lotion, because that will leave a residue on the lens. There you go. Also, don't spray any kind of lens cleaner on the lens, because it will soak into the space between the glass and the rings that hold the lens into place. Another place to clean that I forget frequently is back here. Every camera of this type has some sort of a viewfinder, and again, if you have a slightly damp tissue or a Q-tip, you can swab it around here. Window cleaner evaporates pretty quickly, so you don't have to be fastidious about drying it. The next safety suggestion is to make sure that a film camera is switched off up here, if in fact this is where the battery is controlled. it may have an off or on symbol right here that tells you you haven't turned it off. Here's a Canon AE1, very popular camera. There's no battery switch on the bottom. This is a newer camera. Instead, there is this switch here. Should be in the L for lock position, as opposed to A for automatic, and S, I don't know what that means. Single something. I'm not a Canon owner, so I don't know all the details on this camera. You'll see similar matters, a view screen here, and a different kind of lens. I borrowed the filter off this one in the first place. So let's talk now about internal camera safety. Typically, there's no reason to remove the lens unless you have more than one, and you're going to change the lens over. The most delicate part of the camera in the front face is this mirror right here. The mirror swings quickly out of the way when you take a photo, so it's not a permanently positioned mirror, and it shows the image that the lens views. It bounces it up around inside this prism, and you see it out the back. The mirror has silver on the top. All mirrors use silver, but this kind of mirror uses it on the top of the glass, whereas most mirrors use silver on the bottom of the glass, and you can clean the glass without damaging the silver. Here, you should use nothing at all to clean the silver, because just about anything you use will begin to scratch it. So no fingers. It's a precision moving object. It's not mounted tightly in position. Don't let the kids play around in there. Also, if this was a digital camera, there'd be a real reason not to want to leave the body of the camera open. Here's a digital. It doesn't look much difference other than that it's beefier. But inside of this camera, there's a mirror you can barely see. Let's try and get it in the right position. And directly behind the mirror, there may be a shutter of some sort, but there's also a sensor, an electronic sensor that reads the image when you take a picture. And that sensor wants to accumulate dust. The tiniest bit of dust will start to register in some, but not all of your photos. So keeping this chamber closed and out of the weather is a darn good idea. Let's go back here to the other important areas not to touch in a camera. We're back to the Minolta, which has a very simple way of opening the back. This is a film camera. If we pull this rewind lever up, which is kind of sticky, it has a spring-loaded release. Pull up some more and the back of the camera opens right here. This is the film chamber, and typically a roll of film is going to go into this cavity over here, and it's going to cross these two rails called film rails. It's going to be wound up in the take-up spool. In the center of the camera, the shutter is a moving piece of either metal or fabric. See it make a little quick movement right there. Well, that shutter is extremely delicate. It's made of very, very fine cloth. There are springs that operate it. There's a long exposure. You can see the lens behind the shutter. This shutter should never be touched, so changing film can be a little bit of a challenge. You'll see that some dust has accumulated inside the back of this camera. Kind of a no-no. We're not going to deal with cleaning though right now. The way to clean this is just to spray it out with a can of compressed air. Don't spray around the curtain of the shutter, however. Let's look at an even more delicate shutter. This is the one in the Canon. The Canon shutter, if you'll look closely, is made of a thin reflective foil instead of cloth. It's kind of hard to tell, but that foil is titanium, and if it's touched, it can be dented. Once it gets a dent in it, it never works again. It's not economical to repair old cameras because these old cameras are only worth $20 to $30 a piece, and the repair cost, I'm sure, is a factor of 4 to 6 or more.